Hi, Libby.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. Guys, I'm so thrilled. We have Libby Springer here. She's going to drop a lot of knowledge and sort of like helpful hints. I mean, I can't wait to get into her story. But Libby and I went to high school together, which is like eons ago at this point. But I have followed her like a fitness journey, a career journey, a mom journey, and so we have lots to dive into today. But Libby, in your words, like tell us who you are, where you're at, and a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for asking me. I'm very honored to be here. And, I definitely don't consider myself an expert in really anything, but I'm always happy to just share, what's worked for me or what I've seen work for others. So, yes, I'm Libby, and I am in a suburb right outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. Like you said, like Shannon said, we went to high school together. So I always say first and foremost, I'm a wife and a mom of three boys. So we're actually getting ready to go back to school. My oldest will be a freshman in high school. My middle will be a seventh grade middle schooler, and my youngest will be in second grade. So lots of lots of age span there. And I have been in corporate marketing and mostly healthcare marketing for almost 20 years now, which seems really crazy to say. But I took a little break for a few years while I opened up my own boutique. So, it'll be 5 years this September that I've owned my boutique State of Grace. And I'm currently back into my corporate marketing position as a director of marketing communication for a large healthcare system here in Indiana.
How do you have time to do all this?
It's so funny because I get that question a lot. And I always say, well, number one, I feel like it has a lot to do with personality. Like I'm just somebody who's always loved working. And I think that because I love the jobs, quote, that I have, it's just easier for me naturally to balance that. I also, one thing I always say is, when somebody's saying, how do you do that? I'm like, well, that's just the stage of life I'm at right now. It's the chapter I'm in. I think a lot of times, especially in today's world with social media, it's so easy to see like what others are doing. And, we post a highlight reel. I use mine mostly for a highlight reel. And it's really easy to compare yourself and say, oh my gosh, well, she's doing that or he's doing that. And I don't feel like I'm measuring up like, geez, I'm not doing enough. But it's the stage of life I'm at. If you rewind time to 10 years ago, I mean, I had just put my notice in at work saying I wanted to go down to part time. I had two kids. I didn't have my third son yet. And I
Mhm.
just think that, we all, as you evolve during your life, like you're in different chapters. And so it's never good to compare. I always say, don't compare your chapter to someone else's chapter. Like this is the stage of life I'm in because my kids are older and more self sufficient. And my husband works from home too, 100% of the time. So we can easily juggle this together.
Mhm.
But it would be a different story. It was even a different story 5 years ago. When I went to open the boutique, I knew that I could not balance having a full time job
Mhm.
and opening up a brand new boutique at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So are you still full time at the marketing role and as a boutique owner?
Yes. So I'm full time in the marketing role. And so I will say, having been open almost 5 years at the boutique, there are
Yeah.
two store managers. So they run the day to day operations. I do a lot of the behind the scenes, ownership stuff, the financials, the reporting, things like that. I obviously help with the marketing also for it, but there's a lot that I've been able to take off my plate. And because I have two people who I trust with everything, to run those day to day operations. So, that took time to build. And it wasn't until I was at that point that I said, okay, now I'm ready to go back into my corporate career. And it was nice because I could kind of use that time to be, very selfish and looking at only things that I really wanted to do, right? That would work with my schedule. I needed flexibility.
Mhm.
I wanted to be, at an organization that I really loved and believed in. And so that I
Mhm.
waited until the right opportunity came along.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. I want to jump back to a point you were talking about because I actually listened. I was driving with my son yesterday and listened to a podcast, and it was like finishing up and then it rolled into the next one. So I had no idea what episode was coming next. And it was about someone who wrote a book about personal finance and the comparison culture. And I can't recall the title of the book, but it was all about like, don't look at Instagram at someone who's renovated their kitchen and it's beautiful and nice and think like, oh, they have it made. You know, she's like, the backstory, maybe they do. Maybe they've saved up and they did it and they're proud of it. But maybe they had to take out a second mortgage and maybe they paid for it on their credit card. But they just felt like they had to keep up, or they were saying same thing with vacations. Like they had to check in at this certain hotel, but they could only afford something else. You know, she just kept bringing up this point of like, stop looking at everybody else outwardly, start looking in the mirror and live your life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we can all say too from our own personal experiences. I mean, the times that I've gone through really hard things, very rarely do I post, and everyone's different, right? I realize some people are more comfortable posting private things. I tend to be a little bit more private.
Mhm.
So I'm not sharing everything. And social media has, yes, become this comparison. It's this, I've always said I feel you can use social media in a positive way. It's what you make of it. But I think especially over the last couple of years, I just feel like it's started trending toward this negative, and we really have to remember, what we're seeing is just a small snippet of everybody's lives, and it's never a good tool to use for comparison. It's funny that you mentioned that because there was actually an influencer I follow who I'm really picky about influencers that I follow in the first place. But this influencer, I mean, she has a huge following. I think it's over a million
Oh, wow.
followers, and she is very true to herself. But what was so interesting is, and I didn't know this because I didn't follow her years and years ago, but she just posted the other day about how when she first started, she grew. The biggest time of her growth was when her husband had lost his job. So
Mhm.
they had moved in with her parents for a little bit and then found a rental that they
Yeah.
were renting for a while. He was finally a few months later able to go back, I guess, to the same position. But during that time, that's when she and her daughter were doing these like twinning looks, and that's how she sort of took off. But the funny part is, she said, it was the bathroom where they would always do their pictures was
Mhm.
a carpeted bathroom. She did not realize that that was even like she said, so many people would message her, be like, is that carpet in your bathroom? And like, really just like, they were surprised by it. And she said,
Mhm.
but this just goes to show, because of course now she lives in a beautiful big house. She goes, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a big house to be successful. You don't have to have, this perfectly staged house to, be an influencer or to post pictures on Instagram. Like, I had my biggest growth period when I was just, having fun with my daughter, and we were shooting pictures on a carpeted bathroom floor. So,
Yeah,
um, goes right along with that message.
totally. And there's like the simplicity of life that sort of gets forgotten.
Yeah.
But do you guys, I mean, speaking of like owning a fashion boutique, like, how do you guys do marketing that like sort of feels good and you're not kind of getting in that comparison trap?
So I will say, when I opened the boutique, one of the biggest reasons, well, there are a couple of big reasons. Number one was, I just felt like, for me personally at that time in my life, I love shopping local, but a lot of the local boutiques either felt like they were for women way younger than me or for women way older than me. I felt like I just didn't find that one boutique. And so that was really my goal, is like, I know who I'm trying to target here. I'm trying to target, similar demographics when it comes to, where you live, and what kind of styles you like, kind of classic, but maybe you're willing to try a few trendier styles. So that's really, where I went with it. And one of the goals, the other goal being that I just wanted to be able to like be a bigger part of the community and like bring women together in a really positive way. But we really focus on, when it comes to marketing for the boutique, not being part of like every trend. So we don't do a whole lot with influencers, to be
Mhm.
honest, because I ran the numbers for a small business like ours.
Mhm.
Like, it just doesn't, typically speaking, I don't want to say never, typically speaking, it doesn't pay off. Like, when you actually sit down and run the numbers of the ROI on what you would pay someone, right? And
Mhm.
how many can you actually sell? And will these customers become customers, long-term customers, not just make this one-off purchase? I don't care about how many followers we have. I care about how many followers equate to sales.
Mhm.
So that's one thing we've always been really big on, is not just taking part in every trend or every marketing trend.
Mhm.
TikTok. I mean, I know there's a lot of boutiques that have like blown up on TikTok and had a ton of followers. That's not where the majority of our target market is. So we're not going to be on TikTok. It just doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. We've also been kind of fighting this whole reels trend, right? Like Instagram's trying to really encourage those reels. And it's like, but it has to feel natural too. And I
Yeah.
realize like trying something new isn't going to feel natural at first, but we do it in a way that feels natural for us. So, it's not natural for us to get on camera and dance, but it is natural that we love showing different ways to wear styles. And one of our things we've done from day one, before reels were even a thing, is showed like 3 ways to wear it. So you take one piece like a blazer or skirt and show like 3 or 4 ways that you can wear that. So that's really where we're focused, is like bringing value, I guess,
Mhm.
to customers, not just saying, hey, you really need this really cute trendy top that is now the most current trend. It's like, no, we want to bring value and show you how you can wear something, or how you can pair this with things you already have.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I think that that speaks to sort of like building that community you were talking about
Yes.
too, because it's like it's great to have like feet in the door, but are they your customer? Are they going to keep coming back? Are they, going to really resonate with who you are? I think a couple of months ago, I was like planning a trip to Vegas with my husband. And I'm like, I'm going to go to Urban Outfitters and I'm going to get something really cute. I walked in and A, I was like a little horrified by like the extreme 90s style. Um, and B, I like grabbed a couple dresses. I'm like, whatever, I'm gonna try on some things. Like, it's not that expensive. I'll just, get this like short mini dress that I probably had in high school. And I like looked in the mirror and I'm like, I can't do this. Like I have aged out of this.
Yep.
And, I don't follow them on any platform. And the people I see wearing it are so much younger. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to walk down the street to Madewell. And that feels a little bit more where my life stage is at. So it's just so interesting to see of like, for a long time, we had all these choices of where to shop and it felt overwhelming. But now I feel, smart marketers like you are like, this is my niche and this is my zone and this is where I'm playing in. And my audience will love it. And I will get those like long-term shoppers by just staying true to who I am.
Right. You can't be everything to everyone, right? And I think when we first opened, we were try a little bit that way, just because
Mhm.
we didn't know.
Yeah.
We wanted customers to come in and tell us, like, show us what you want, right? What do you
Mhm.
like of what we have? And we're going to gear more toward that way. But at the
Yeah.
beginning, you kind of do try to serve everyone, and it's just not possible to sustain long term
Mhm.
if you're trying to be everything to everyone. And we're real big. The thing I love hearing is like, I'll pop into the store once or twice a week just to check
Mhm.
on things. And I love coming in when, like the managers are in the store typically like majority of the days, and I'll hear them working with a customer, and that customer will try something on and she's like, well, I just don't know. I'm not sure how. And after a few minutes of really reading, their body language and listening to them, our managers will say, well, you know what? If you're not feeling confident in this, or at least confident
Mhm.
enough to try it, like that's going to show through, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to enjoy wearing this. It's not about, age. It's like, I'll never say, oh, you shouldn't wear something because of your age, but it's more
Mhm.
about, if you're not feeling like you in this, if you're just feeling really uncomfortable,
Mhm.
let's not get it. Like, let's try
Yeah.
something different. And so I love hearing that, because it's not about the sale, making the sale.
Mhm.
It's about making sure when they walk out that door, they feel good in whatever they have.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because that confidence is going to shine through, and then it leads to more like word of mouth too. Where'd you
Yep.
get that? You look great. You
Yep.
look amazing. Um, yeah, that's great. So I have another question about community because I think it's often overlooked and wellness as a whole of how important it is to like surround yourself with good people, both in the workplace and in your personal life and what you're building with your business. Like, can you talk a little bit about the communities that you have in your life?
Yes. So that's such a great point. I don't know if you're a big reader, but I have read a few Brene Brown books, and she's one of my favorite authors. She talks a lot about just how we were really made to be part of a community. It doesn't mean you have to be friends with everyone you meet, but or it doesn't mean you even have to be an outgoing person. It's just we're meant, and I think we are wired to need one another. So it's funny because in the past couple years, obviously it's been a totally different ball game owning a store. Pre-COVID, I mean, we were just in our height and had opened a second location 5 months before the pandemic hit. So everything changed after COVID. I mean, and it was incredibly stressful. 2020 was one of the most stressful years I've ever had. But I will say, like, it would have been really easy for me to give up, because truly there were some days I'm like, is this stress even worth it anymore? Like, I
Right.
don't know. I couldn't really say that I was enjoying it at that point in time.
Mhm.
But what kept me going was the community. What kept me going is, not just like friends I've made, but seeing the friendships that have formed with women who have worked in the store, becoming friends with each other, women, that are that work in the store becoming friends with our customers. I mean,
Mhm.
it's such a great community, and it truly does uplift everyone. And that's the one thing I kept saying is, it uplifted me during a time that I really needed it to
Yeah.
keep going forward with it. So, we love the fact that it's kind of like, I compare it to like a hairstylist. Like, you go to get your hair
Mhm.
done and you just confide in your hairstylist. There's something about sitting in that chair and you start talking and telling your personal things. And that's how women feel when they come in the store. And it's just so fantastic to see that they have that kind of trust with us. So, I definitely think we live our mission out every single day.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I was talking to a friend recently of this. There's like so many studies of the blue zones of the world, and these communities. They were like, oh, it's an island off the coast of Japan, and they have a certain fish or certain type of potato that only grows there. And for so long, they thought this is what is dramatically increasing their lifespan. Like most of the population, there's like one in Italy, one in Japan, and one somewhere else. Like everyone lives to over 100. Everyone. And
That's
what they
amazing.
have now discovered is like it's not about the food at all. I mean, yeah, part of it, but it's about the community. Everyone sits down for meals together. Everyone knows each other's kids' names. Like it really feels like everyone's looking out for each other. And that is the piece that is both keeping their lifespan long and like their brain health really with it, because these 100-year-old men and women like can do crossword puzzles. They can care for the kids. Like they are still cooking and moving around, like very different than what we have going on in the US at that
Yes.
age. But it's just so interesting that these studies about community and friendship and like having those deep connections are really, what's keeping us healthy.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. It's so where we live is about 2.5 hours away from, where I grew up,
Yeah.
and went to school. And so both my parents and my husband's parents don't live here. They live about 2.5 hours away. My brother does live here, which is nice. So we have some family here. But really, when our kids were little, I mean, we had no family to turn to say, hey, can you watch? It was, no, we needed to go out and find our in-home daycare that we loved, and we needed to find a preschool that we loved. And both our in-home daycare provider and our preschool became like family to us. We
Yeah.
found friends who just like, I had a friend who I met through the preschool who offered, because I was going to have to pay for my kids to go to the before school
Mhm.
program for school, because I couldn't be here to get them on the bus at that point of time in my life. When I was working, I had to leave before the bus came. So, and my husband was always gone early in the mornings for work. So, she offered to put, just bring him here and I'll get him on the bus with one of his buddies from preschool. I was like, that
Yeah.
is so kind of you. And we've become incredibly close. And just as years have gone, it's like, we've made friends who have become like family to us, that are, parents of our kids' friends, and they are our village. And I don't know what we would have done without them. It's been absolutely life changing to find those types of people, and to know that you have someone you can count on. And it's like, we look to each other for advice, and we know that we can count on each other when our kids are each person's house. There's no worries, and it does a lot for us. It does a lot for the community to have people like that.
Totally. And your kids too. They probably are so much more
Mhm.
trusting of so many other people and get those different life experiences. And it's
Yes.
amazing. I think that's one piece that I do miss from back home of like, you know, my husband and I are not from Los Angeles, and he's from New York, so he's even further away. And when family comes in, it's sort of like the honeymoon period where it's like, oh, let's play with the kids, let's get everybody loaded up with sugar, like let's not sleep. Cool, that's what grandparents are supposed to do. That's what aunts and uncles are supposed to do. But it's not the same as being able to like phone a friend. But I think we actually moved in March of 2020, outside of West Hollywood, where it was like insane and crazy, to the Valley, and it's been the best move. However, like for 2 years, like no one left their houses, so I feel like we're coming out of it, and now with kids back in school and all of that, like it's like finally, like I feel like I know the neighbors and can make a phone call and, someone would be here in a heartbeat and vice versa. And that feeling, is amazing. And I know, I mean, my kids are much younger than yours, but like, as they progress through school and you're building that community through school, like, you're going to find those people who've got your back all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And once you have that, anything feels like home. Um,
Exactly, exactly. I mean, we're at a point now where it's like this. I mean, for our kids, like this is their home. We've contemplated every now and then,
mhm.
like oh, moving not far away, but like somewhere else. If we change school districts, like our kids would be so upset. And
Yeah.
I really like sat down and thought about. It. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we'd be leaving our whole village. Like that would be really hard for us as parents to do.
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah, it's nice to like leave it for a vacation for a little bit, but you need that day to day.
Yes.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about like how 2020 was so stressful for you. Like 2021, 2022, like coming out of it, like how did you heal? How did you, get the smile and like life back in your face? I mean, I can't imagine owning multiple stores at the time of all that and what you had to go through.
Yeah, so I feel like I could like literally go on for the whole rest of this session about this. So I'm going to try to shorten it as much as I can. Um yeah, 2020 was really hard. I will say, so it's funny because before that, I was definitely in our marriage the more laid
Mhm.
back one. Like I was like,
Mhm.
my husband worries enough for the both of us. And
Yeah.
I feel like there was like a role reversal. Not that he wasn't stressed at all during 2020, but there was definitely a role reversal where I would say it's still there. Like I am definitely more stressed of a person now than I was prior to COVID. That
Mhm.
being said, I mean, 2020 came along. We were all stuck inside. I was definitely drinking more. I think for many of us, we did drink more.
Oh, yeah.
And I think what I found is come 2021, I was like, okay, I need to make a change here. And it wasn't just because, I, wanted to lose weight or anything. It was like, no, I just, an overall, like literally need to overhaul my health right now. And I
Yeah.
wasn't, I mean, I was still exercising in 2020. Thank goodness. Thank goodness we had a basement gym because I think that was my saving grace. So for
Okay.
me, exercise has always been about mental health. I like exercising. It is not hard for me to like, I'm very self-motivated to exercise. Nutrition, I'm very knowledgeable, but I definitely have a sweet tooth and have my weaknesses. So I know the importance of eating healthy and I do everything I can to help our family eat healthy. But that probably declined in 2020.
Yeah.
So come 2021, I was like, okay, I'm not drinking during the week.
Mhm.
I am because I'm a wine lover. But it's very easy to let that one glass become two. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, it just made me feel groggy in the mornings. So I was like, cutting out alcohol during the week. And then I was like, okay, I went back to the chiropractor. I felt like that was really important. That was something I had done years ago. And I just went, the chiropractor I see is very into kind of like holistic health
Yeah.
overall. So I knew they would be doing more than just adjustments.
Right.
Um, I looked at like a macros plan to really help better understand like what my body needed for fuel. Found out I was way under eating on protein. So I changed up some things there. I incorporated yoga into my
Mhm.
exercise. So I was never a yoga fan.
Yeah,
I just was, it just bored me. I tried multiple, like different types of yoga classes. I think what I found was my sweet spot is Peloton. So I have a Peloton bike.
yeah.
I started doing 20 or 30-minute yoga classes and finding
Mhm.
that when I keep it to that 20, 30 minutes, I actually really enjoy it and like it.
Right.
So I started incorporating that with the goal of 2021 to do 100 yoga classes for that year. And I was this close to
Mhm.
getting it. The only reason I didn't was because I got really sick at the end of 2021 with bronchitis for like 2 months. I had bronchitis. Had it not been for that, I would have hit the 100 that year. But I think I was at like 95.
I was gonna say, I
Um,
think you got really close.
but it really was just about. I also ended up toward the end of 2021 went to a hormone specialist. There were just like I could tell something was off, and I think through all of that year of just making some of those changes slowly but surely, what I found was like the stress. Um, affects our bodies so much more than what we realize.
Mhm.
So much more. And I'm somebody who I used to teach fitness classes. I had a fitness trainer certification. I had my personal trainer certification. I'm somebody who's knowledgeable
Mhm.
on fitness, nutrition, but like even I did not realize the way stress can impact you. I mean, I just was like I look back at pictures, from 2020, even the beginning of 2021, it's just
Mhm.
so much inflammation. It's not about like weight. It's like just my body was just reacting. So, just learning coping mechanisms for that stress. For me, it's a combination of eating healthy, of exercising, but not over exercising. And I think that's something else I learned in the last couple of years is, you know, back in the day, like I'm a big lover of running and hit style workouts, interval training. And what I found is like, it's okay. You can do those sometimes, but you need to incorporate some of these exercises that are really more about it's easier on your body, but it's more about your mind. So for me, that's what yoga did.
Yeah, but
So
that's
I
that's
think,
the hard
yeah,
shift. I don't mean to cut you off, but,
yeah,
um, my dad always said growing up, like, "It's not a workout until you sweat." And
hmm
so it'd be like, jump on the bike, go for a run, like, that'd be the start of a workout, and then anything else would be secondary. But me too, it took me so long to shift that brain and be like, "You gotta slow down, you gotta slow down." And those workouts are just as beneficial as the others. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes I feel like, sometimes like the it's harder almost, especially when you're not used to it. I mean, my balance, was so I've come a long way. I
Yeah.
still can't even come close to doing some of these really cool yoga moves. Like I have goals. One day I'll learn to do them. But you know, the other thing I will say is just like what you surround yourself with. And I actually just heard this quote the other day, and I don't remember what the exact quote was, but it was talking about how your overall wellness isn't just what you consume, eat, what the things you eat and put inside your body. It's also what you consume around you. Who do you surround yourself with? What
Mhm.
are you giving your attention and energy to? I will be honest, like we don't turn on the news in our house ever. In 2020, when we were shut down for 2 months, I had the news on every day because I was listening to these conferences because I wanted to know, like, when are we opening back up? Like,
Right.
as a business owner, I'm like stressed out. I'm like, what do I need to plan for? How much longer is this going to be? Are they going to say how much longer it's going to be?
Mhm.
And I have no doubt that that affected my mental health during that period of time. So we don't turn on the news because it's mostly negative. It's not that we're burying our heads in the sand and not
Mhm.
knowing what's going on in the world. Obviously, we find our ways to find out, but there's just certain, it is. It's about everything that you consume. Visually, everything you listen to. And I always say, like, the things that bring you joy, make sure you're finding time to fit those in. I love reading. I
Yeah.
actually enjoy cooking. I despise cleaning. So it's like figure out the things you can outsource
Yep.
that
Yep.
you don't like doing, but do the things to make time for the things you enjoy because, I love cooking dinner. I love reading books. And so, I try to end most of my days right before I go to bed of reading a book at night, before I shut the lights off.
Yeah. I think the prioritization of everything is so important because a lot of the clients that I work with are battling like not major things. Like I'm not working with people who have serious medical conditions. They should be working, with a medical team for that. But let's say you're trying to balance sugar cravings and someone's having a really, really hard time with that. It's a you can't just take away sugar and expect that craving to go away. It's sort of, I mean, sugar, you get addicted to it and you approach it like an addict of like you have to slowly peel back but introduce something else. Like, you can't just cut a habit. And it's also like taking action. And I think like you are definitely a person who takes action to make change in their lives, but a lot of people need, help and steps to do that because it's easy to say, I want to do this, but it's so
Mhm.
hard to actually do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say too that I've always been you when you surround yourself with people, right? So I've always been a part of the fitness community.
Yeah.
So you forget sometimes until you can take a step back that like not everybody has that same knowledge, right?
Mm-mm.
Like we may assume like we went to a certain school and we got this certain education and we know how to do this and oh, I've been a part of a fitness community, so I've received tips and heard things here and there, but not everybody has. And so it's really easy to forget sometimes that like yes, and there are people who are motivated by different things. I have friends who are like, oh my gosh, I could never make myself go down into my own basement and do a workout almost daily. Like, how do you do? I'm like, that's just me. But I have friends who are like, oh, I'm motivated by group fitness classes, so I'm going to pay right for that membership because I know that's going to make me go to be around people,
Mhm.
and because I'm paying for the service, right? Like I'm not going to let it go to waste. So everyone is different in what works for them. But like I think you said something really important is prioritizing it, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I will say taking it one step further, not only prioritizing it and putting this on your calendar, and it's really easy for me. I'm an early workout person. I
Mhm.
have to get it done in the morning because between work and my kids, like the rest of my day, well into the evening is pretty much taken up,
Mhm.
right? It's
Yeah.
busy. So if I don't get it done in the morning, I'm likely not going to get it done. And it's really easy for me to some days to just want to turn over and hit that snooze and go back to sleep and get an extra half hour to an hour in. But prioritizing it,
Mhm.
helps to make sure that, I am like, I know I'm going to feel so much better.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will say is like, you can't expect to feel better and you can't expect those changes like right off the bat. I think that's the other thing is we're so ingrained as a society that we expect immediate results and immediate, gratification, and it just doesn't happen like that. Whether your goal is just to, feel better and have more energy, that was a huge goal of mine the past year and a half has been I need to get my energy back.
Yeah.
But whether it's, feeling better, getting more energy, losing weight, building muscle, like that comes
Mhm.
over time. I mean, I did an in so when was it? It was the beginning, or no, it's about a year and 3 months ago. I did an in-body scan. And what that does is it tells you like it's not just about weight. It tells you like what's your body fat percentage, not the BMI because that's a really outdated tool that they use
Yeah.
to do your BMI, but body fat percentage, how much muscle mass do you have? How much
Yeah.
fat, and it
Mhm.
really helps you to determine, okay, like where, like, it's not just, hey, lose 10 pounds. It's like, okay, you could stand to lose 5 pounds of fat, but gain 5 pounds of muscle, or, it gives those types
And the
much
scale
more
will
in
change.
depth. Yes.
Yeah.
And so over the course of a year and 3 months, I mean, I have seen such great results, like in doing because I just did another in-body scan. But that's been a year and 3 months. A
Yes.
year and 3 months, my body composition has changed. But that's a very, I think most people just aren't willing to wait that long to see those types of results, right?
Mhm.
So that's the other thing to recognize is like, this really has to be something you're dedicated to. It's a lifestyle. Like, do you want to be healthy? Do you want to feel good? And whether it's mentally, physically, a combination of it, like these changes have to happen over the course of a long period of time, right?
Mhm.
So if we're going to cut out news, like we're cutting out news. It's not just going to be for a 3 month period and then start watching it again. Like
Yeah.
it's everything. Everything just has to be a priority and it has to be long term,
Totally.
which is why fad diets don't work, right?
They don't work. They don't work, but our culture is sort of set up to to have that. Like fast food's easier than cooking. And
Yep.
years ago, I worked on this client. I can't say the name, but they were looking for a name, and it's a drive-through fast food chain, and they were doing a double drive-through. And people could pre-order their food, and then I'm not kidding, they could roll down the passenger side window, and then the team would just throw in the food. And we kiddingly called it throw and go, because so much of the country is like that. And they're like, just give it to me. It's easy. I need this quick fix.
Yep.
But, like you're saying, especially with like gaining muscle, that takes everyday dedication with fitness, with food, with carving out the time to do that, to see results. And I don't think a lot of people want to wait for that. And it's so sad because our health is so much more important than what someone would post on their Instagram story.
Hmm.
Like this flash in the pan instant gratification culture is so tough when our health is actually going to keep us around so much longer for ourselves, for our partners, for our kids, whatever the home makeup is at home. But it's so good to hear you reinforce of like, it takes work, and do the work and you can get to where you want to go.
And you may not like it at first, right? Like you brought up you cutting out sugar. Like
Yeah,
that's hard to do at first. I mean,
so hard.
your cravings aren't going to magically go away.
Mhm,
So you're going to have it's just like if somebody's told like, okay, you really just need to, you're consuming too many calories and you need to consume less. Well, like
mhm,
you're going to feel really hungry probably the first week or two that you're following this nutrition plan. You're going to have those sugar cravings the first week or two that you cut it out. But the longer you stick with it, the more natural it feels. And then pretty soon you don't feel hungry, and pretty soon
mhm.
you don't have as strong of sugar cravings, but you have to get over that hump first. So,
You have to. It's like doing the Whole 30. It's like you do it
yes.
the first 2 weeks are just awful, and then you become this, like, terrible person, and you're like, "I need this, I need this, I need this." Then all of a sudden, you feel, like, elated, and you're like, "Why would I ever go back to eating this
Yeah.
way or, being this way?" But yeah, it takes work and time, and sorry, there's a
It's
little guy
it's
right.
funny because oh, sorry, I think you cut out there.
Oh, our pool guy just arrived. So if you hear some noise, that's it.
No, so I was going to say it's funny so nutrition wise,
Mhm.
I'm a big believer. I'm sure it probably has to do with just I have 3 boys who eat us out of house and home. Like I have to be somewhat structured when it comes to what we're spending our grocery money on, because I'm like, oh my gosh, otherwise could spend even more money than the ridiculous amount that we already spend. And we're not big on like we may on the weekends like order out or
Mhm.
something or go out to eat, but like one night. But for the most part, we cook at home. We have dinners together at home. But I will say that I tell my friends and they all know this about me. Like I schedule our dinners. So like I
Yeah,
know what I'm going to make for dinner for the whole week, right? I
mhm,
have a little menu board on our refrigerator so the kids know what we're going to have each night.
yeah,
And then when I do my grocery shopping, typically I'm ordering it and going and picking it up and doing like the click list.
mhm,
But that's how I shop. I make my shopping list based on like, okay, I need these ingredients for these recipes. Sometimes I might even like pre-make my lunches or breakfast so
mhm,
that it's a quick grab and go for my, really busy days. I make sure, I have all the kids' lunch stuff. And, some of my friends are like, I don't know how you can do that. Like how
mhm.
you are able to like plan it. I'm like, I don't know how people don't do it, because I feel like if I didn't do it, I would just like go grocery shopping and be like, I don't know, I'll buy some
Mhm,
chicken, I'll buy some bananas, and
mhm.
like then I get home and I would have spent, $300 and not had anything to actually make a dinner. Not that it
Yeah,
needs to be anything, complicated, but for me, I'm like, it makes me feel better knowing that I have like a plan of action. And so, when people talk about like meal prep, I'm like, it's really just me saying, okay, I want to make sure I'm not overspending for groceries and that
mhm,
I know what I want to get. And it doesn't take time to basically say, okay, 5 or 6 nights of dinner, here's what we're doing.
yeah,
I need to make sure I have everything, for those dinners. And then everything else is just kind of like, okay, the
mhm,
general, like what do we need for breakfast and lunch? And but yeah, it's a lot of I'm amazed at the number of friends I have who have large families, like lots
yeah,
of kids, and they are able to just walk into the grocery store and do it. I'm like, that's, I can't do that.
No, and it feels like they'd have to go multiple times a week. Like,
Yes.
I mean, I think we do a lot of meal prep on Sundays, and then I try to freeze. Often, like one night a week, we have to do takeout because we don't have time. We run out of time in the
Yeah.
day, but it's so helpful to have things that are cut up, that are prepared. You can grab and go. You can kind of, I call them like boosts and combos. Like, here's a couple of things that are like super healthy you can add to this, and here's some couple combinations that work. And like
Yep.
everyone has everything they need. And, even if I can't be there to cook dinner, like there is dinner there and everyone can figure it out. But it's so hard to even think about doing that without a plan. Otherwise, like it's just like on the phone, like, oh, Postmates, oh this, and like that becomes 100 times more expensive than actually meal planning.
Yes. Oh yeah. I like dread, like, it's so fun when we're on vacation and we like go out to dinner as a family, but I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my God, it's so expensive for a family of five, especially with three growing boys
Mhm.
to eat out. So I will say finances definitely,
Yeah,
help me stay motivated with planning our menu for the week.
totally. Your present is my future. So I am learning very quickly how much boys eat. I mean, I work out, I eat a lot, but even my youngest son, the amount that kid can put down, I'm like, oh my gosh, when you were in high school, I'm not sure what we're going to do. I'm not
Oh
sure.
yeah. I remember when my oldest was one, and I mean, we would have family members just watch him in amazement when I would make homemade pancakes because he would eat probably five of them at 1 year old in one sitting. And they're like, I cannot believe he's eating that many.
Mhm.
So, yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned books. What's on your bedside table? Like anything you're reading now that you're like everyone should be reading this, or anything you've read in the past couple months?
Oh, yes. Like, I feel like so I on my Instagram, I have like, on my highlights, I have a books highlight, and then I had to start a new one because it got so long with so
Yeah.
many highlights that so then I have a books 2022 highlight. So this year I'm not doing as good as I did last year. Last year I read like 20 something books, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
This year I think I'm on like book 7 or 8. I do a combination really, and I usually have two books going at once, because one will be more like I don't want to say motivational, but nonfiction. I typically read a nonfiction and a fiction. So the fiction is like more fun, more lighthearted, kind of like watching like your favorite trashy TV show.
Yeah.
So and I actually just started. So our State of Grace boutique. We had a couple models and our two
Mhm.
photographers who wanted to start a book club. So it's myself and one of our managers, and then our two photographers and one of our models. We just decide each month what book we want to read, and it's
Mhm.
typically an easy read like fiction book, and then it just gives us an excuse to go out one night a month,
Yeah.
talk about it, over drinks and appetizers. So that's been really fun. We just started doing that. um, I will say I'm a big fan when it comes to fiction of Elin Hildebrand books. So if you're a fiction lover, those are some of my favorite, like just fun novels. She also does has a couple of like series, and like if you start reading a lot of her books, you'll realize like this some of the same characters are in different books, but just
Yeah.
in a different way. Like sometimes they'll be the feature character, and then other times they'll just kind of be in the background of a different book. So
Mhm.
I like her books.
Mhm.
From a nonfiction, I would say, like I said earlier, Brene Brown books I think are really interesting. She puts a lot of data and research behind her books. So I don't feel like it's necessarily anything new that people don't know or haven't heard, but there's just more like research around it,
Yeah.
more fact driven. I also love Bob Goff books. So I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's
No,
like
I'm not. Tell me more about him.
he writes it comes from more of like a place of strong faith,
Yeah.
and I won't say religion because he's not, I don't wouldn't necessarily call him someone who's religious, but he really just preaches kindness and living a world, living a life that is all about being kind and loving others. And I just think it's so practical what he says, and
Yeah.
it makes you kind of like take a step back and think about just your actions toward others, and especially those who believe differently than you, which I think a
Mhm.
lot of us could use right now, in this day and age. But so I'm reading one of his new book is called Undistracted.
Mhm.
So it's really talks about all the distractions in our life, and you know, the benefit of recognizing what those distractions are and being able to
Yeah.
step away from being distracted, and really focusing on what matters. So that's my nonfiction that I'm reading. And then the fiction that I am getting ready to start is called like The Perfect Marriage, I think. So, um,
Oh, does it have the blue cover? Oh, no, no, that's an American Marriage.
okay. So
Yeah.
it's a total, all I know about it is it's about a man who's married to an attorney. He has an affair, his mistress turns up dead, and his
Oh.
wife has to defend him and save him.
Oh,
So it sounds really interesting and totally trashy. So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that one. I'm actually finishing a book right now about it's a true story. And it was actually one that I listened to a podcast. So I don't know if you've ever listened to American Scandal. Do you listen to
No,
that podcast at all?
I know what it is, but I haven't listened to it.
So I guess the best way to describe it is they have many series, and it's typically like 4 or 5 podcasts in a series that talks through a story that of something that's happened in American history. So, but it's
Mhm.
a scandal.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
like Watergate was one of them. They have some really good ones. A Lance
Mhm.
Armstrong story was one of them.
That's juicy.
Um, Really interesting.
Mhm.
But there was one I started listening to, and it was about I don't know if I'm going to say it right, the Osage or Osage Indian group
Mhm.
that this was back in the early 1900s. They were being murdered, and because their land that they were on had oil. They were on land that had a lot of oil underneath, so they all became really wealthy and rich. But it is the book. So I started listening to the podcast,
Yeah.
got really into the first episode, and then to listen to the rest, it said you had to download a different app and pay for it. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. Um, well, come to find out, I knew someone who had a book that was all about this.
Oh,
So I'm
perfect.
almost finished with the book. I will say it is so good, so
Mhm.
infuriating to read, like just the course of American history, like what happened to this group and what, you know, what people were able to get away with for so long. So I haven't finished it. I'm hoping and praying that
Mhm.
these men get caught that did
Yeah.
this and treated them this way. But it's a really good book. So I could go on and on about books for hours.
Oh, gosh, yes. If you guys finish this other marriage book, I have to recommend The American Marriage.
Okay,
It
I'm writing it down.
is one of my all-time favorite books. And I think it got picked up to be in like after it came out like a year or two later, then it got put in like Oprah's book club and Reese Witherspoon's book club. Um,
Oh,
it is so good.
is it fiction?
It is fiction, and it's just
Okay.
the complexities of marriage through time and in the South at a time where there was some unrest. So,
Okay.
highly recommend that. I have one last question for you, and it's what I ask everybody. Um, a girlfriend of mine in college, we started this like, if you had a button to do whatever it was, what would it do? And it's so silly. Like everyone's answers are always all over the place. So I'm curious to hear yours. Like if you had this button with you at all times, you could press it and something would happen. What would be your dream?
I feel like there's so many things, right, that I'm
Mhm.
sure everyone has a hard time like giving one answer to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. You can give it even,
So
it's totally fine.
I would say if I could push a button and make it do something, I would probably make it like a traveling button. So like I push it and I just appear wherever I need to be. So no more flying, no more driving long distances. It's funny because I'm like, I always try to also analyze. So at my corporate job, like we have someone on our team who's really good at like analyzing everybody's answers, and she always asks these great icebreakers during our meetings. And I feel like if I was to analyze my answer,
Hmm.
if somebody else gave it, I'd probably say it's about time, right?
Yeah.
Saving time,
Hmm.
like that for me. I think time is like the most important thing out of the most important thing we have. So to be able to save time, I think would be so great. But yes, just
Yeah.
to push that button and I show up in Florida in about 2 minutes.
let me analyze your answer a little bit further. I think what you were talking about, right in the beginning of our podcast of like stress and like you eliminate the travel stress. You don't
Yep.
have to worry about getting all the boys in a car, on a plane, on anything. You are making it easy on yourself and them.
Yeah. No, totally right. And I'm not like I fly. I wouldn't say a lot. I'd probably get on a plane at least a few times a year.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't enjoy it. I don't like the process, right? Of having to drive to the airport and check in and wait in line and get on the plane. Like,
Yeah.
and plus you always deal with the stress, right? Nowadays of flying, I'm not knowing, are you going to be delayed? Is your flight going to get canceled? So yes, I think you're right. Like the stress of not having to deal with flying plus saving all that time.
Hmm.
That's what my button would do.
Nice. Oh, now I'm dreaming of a vacation that is not,
Me
but
too.
there needs to be. Um, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Libby. This is an awesome conversation. I feel like we can keep chatting, but I know you have a million things to get back to. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I look forward to listening to all the other podcasts to come.
Yay. There's some fun guests coming. So stay tuned. Awesome. Well, I'll just end here.